Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnanam Jana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave.
So we'll continue the same format as yesterday. We'll be discussing Krishna consciousness at home, in student life, with questions which you can again write and send to me. And if you don't know English well enough, you can also give the message or then translate the questions. Or otherwise you can just speak the questions if you feel more comfortable, whichever way. I thought you were going to do it consecutively. No, sentence by downwards, so it's not such. Now, yesterday we were in the middle of a discussion, important point, which I hadn't finished speaking about, so I'll continue on that. The problem, the eternal problem of the material world, which is more pronounced in the modern age, of agitation of the mind due to mixing of the senses. This was particularly asked about in relationship to student life. On the modern campuses, young men and women mix very freely, and inevitably the vata and fire effect is that when vata is put in the proximity of fire, naturally it melts. So in the same way, when there is free mixing of the sexes, then automatically there will be agitation of the mind, which is a great obstacle to advancing in Krishna consciousness. So what to do? Well, of course, as much as possible, we should protect ourselves. The whole process of Krishna consciousness is to elevate the consciousness to Krishna consciousness. We get a higher taste by chanting Hare Krishna. We get strength by associating with devotees. And our intelligence becomes fixed by studying Srila Prabhupada's book. Still, despite all these things, despite knowing that this is all nonsense, still our mind tends to become disturbed. Alavan Indriya Brahmo Vidvam Shamma Hikarshati. Bhagavatam describes that even a learned person, even a person who's very highly learned, his senses can be agitated. So, what to do? I can just cite a couple of examples of students I know in India and the approach that they took. One was a medical student, now he's qualified as a doctor. He's quite an exceptional devotee. Even when he was studying at medical college, he would every day come to Mangalarti. Medical college means a lot of studying, you have to spend long hours studying. And he was quite upfront, and he was quite open about his being a devotee of Krishna. And he didn't mind that he became somewhat socially ostracized, quite rigid in his Krishna consciousness. He didn't mind people calling him strange or anything like that. And he was prepared to preach strongly to anybody. Because he had a strong conviction in Krishna consciousness and a good grasp of the philosophy. So as far as dealing with materialistic people in general, he became a little ostracized. He was considered rather unsociable on the campus. The same thing, he didn't hang around in the cafeteria talking nonsense. He didn't go to parties. And like the other young men, medical students, he didn't hang around talking to the young women, medical students. And if there was any need to talk with the young women students, he would just, whatever had to be spoken, he would speak. And that even with the young men medical students, he didn't waste his time on them. So that was his approach. It was a little curt. Curt means cut and dried, a little rigid. And he was also preaching. Although I don't know about here, but at least in India, preaching among medical students is maybe the most difficult group of students to preach to. because they're very much convinced about science, and they're puffed up too. Any medical students? Because to get into medicine, you have to be pretty smart. So anyway, that was his approach, and he kept himself strong, which, when everything else is considered, is the most important point. It's nice to be sociable, it's nice to be friendly, but if you lose your Krishna consciousness, what's without it? Another devotee on campus, in a completely different part of India, taking up Krishna consciousness very seriously, but told me that he had a lot of problem with this problem, which is not surprising because that particular campus is pretty degraded. I mean, by Indian standards, not by Western standards. So I discussed it with him at some length, and we came to. I advised him that, well, you should not think of being a brahmachari. When you finish your education, you should see to getting a job and being married. So he accepted that, and automatically he became much more peaceful in his mind, because that was the direction he was going in. So these are different ways of thinking. Actually, everyone has to make some decision in their life, which direction they're going in, what are they doing. At some point you have to do it. For men, by latest age 30, you should make a clear decision to marry or not to marry. And even earlier, because then if you're going to marry, you have to think about job and career and all these things. Although actually Prabhupada recommended for grihastas, well, different things he recommended, but for most grihastas he recommended that they live on the land, which most of our devotees haven't done, because we're addicted to this city way of life. But for raising children, which is, children are the center of family life, for raising children, the modern cities are not at all a good place. Terrible, horrible, degraded. So our own Krishna conscious communities, even though they may be austere or whatever, they're a better environment for bringing up children and for maintaining our own Krishna consciousness and family life. Modern society is extremely degraded and becoming more so. 20 years ago, we were shocked at the degradation in society, but it's a lot worse now, and it's getting worse all the time. Alright, so I'll open up to questions.
Now, when we start to develop congregation, we see that there are different levels and standards of devotees. So sometimes there are misunderstandings, because some devotees, let's say 10 devotees, he try to follow some standards and rules and regulations which are not practical for someone with in combination from the beginning, and there are sometimes misunderstandings, and can you a little bit explain how to understand these different levels of following rules, regulations, and
yeah. Are you talking about the congregational devotees misunderstanding what standard they should come to, or temple devotees unnecessarily harassing the congregational members? Both.
Not done.
Well, the devotees living in the temple, they should be a little understanding. Actually, traveling in India, I lived many times in homes with Grihastha devotees, so I get to appreciate some of their problems, such as babies crying all night. It's difficult to keep a schedule, regulated schedule, rising early in the morning if you're up all night with the baby. The temple devotees may say, you don't get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and Mongaladi and full morning program. It's difficult when you've got to get the kids to school and the husband to school and the husband to work. familiar picture. The husband has to go to work, and that is the difficulty of Gryhastha. There are certain difficulties. And there are different social considerations. The mother-in-law comes, and she doesn't understand much about Krishna consciousness, and so you have to live with her and still respect her as being mother-in-law. Like this. There's certain adjustments have to be made by Krishna devotees. It's not, the situation is not as conducive for making spiritual advancement as that of devotees living in the temple. That now congregational preaching is expanding. I recommend to, as much as possible, congregational devotees can come and live in the temple for some time. Not all devotees are going to live in the temple, but if young unmarried people are coming to our movement, they may not all decide to live in the temple, but it's good if they come and spend some time before they go on with their secular career, whatever it may be. Say 1 year or something, that training is invaluable. So it may be that, well, you can't develop your career is put back by 1 year or whatever. But our spiritual career is the most important thing. And if young people are coming to our movement, and I would say the first option is do live in the temple. That's better for spiritual advancement. There's one interesting conversation. One man in Melbourne in Australia was asking Prabhupada that, well, how can I make more advancement in Krishna consciousness? Prabhupada said, come and live with us. Prabhupada said, the man said, well, can't I follow the principles at home? Prabhupada said, you can, but it's easier if you come and live with us. Just like getting up early in the morning. If you live with us, we'll get you up in the morning. But at home, if it's dependent on you, then many times you may not. So at least for some time, if devotees come and spend some time in the temple, the training and the taste that you will get is invaluable. Now, as far as congregational devotees seeing the standards in the temple and not being able to come up to them, then we should explain to them. Actually, it requires mature devotees to preach to the congregational devotees. And it's best that congregational devotees, they come under the care of some guidance of a particular experienced devotee who's competent to guide them. Then such a devotee who's monitoring their advancement can see what is their position, their job, their family commitments, their level of advancement, and advise them to set up a program of sadhana accordingly. And devotees living in the temple, they should be instructed that it's not for you to blow away the congregational members. It's not your job. It is your good fortune that you're living in the temple, and you're fortunate to be in this position. And you should follow very strictly, because you have that facility. There's no need to live in the temple unless you're prepared to rise early and follow all the principles. That is a life of full sacrifice. Devotees living in the temple, they shouldn't be having their own separate programs. They should just be prepared to do whatever they're asked to do in service to Krishna. But at the same time, they should be understanding of the devotees who are not, for one reason or another, are not able to live in the temple. It's observed that if devotees living in the temple are condemning those not living in the temple for not coming up to the same standard. It's observed because our whole movement is meant for preaching. We have so many programs, book distribution, festival programs, Harinam Sankirtan, just to get people to come to Krishna consciousness. So when people take up Krishna consciousness and then we say, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, we should be very happy they're taking to Krishna consciousness. Isn't it? And all our preaching is to get people to chant Hare Krishna. And then when they start chanting Hare Krishna, we condemn them. It's madness. At the same time, we should educate the devotees who are living at home and make them aware of the standards and try to help them out. The attitude of devotees living at home should be to respect those who are living in the temples for their sacrifice and dedication. And the attitude of the devotees living in temples should be very appreciative of congregational devotees. And devotees living in the temple shouldn't think that, well, I'm better, I'm more advanced than devotees living outside. That is not a Vaishnava attitude. Another thing is that often it may be devotees who are living outside the temple, many times they're more steady and mature than devotees living inside the temple. And many of them do a lot of very good preaching and make devotees into shulpas. They do so many things. Alright, next one.
Yeah, I have a question regarding the devotees that live at home with their parents. The question is, should we make compromises like wearing a Vaishnava clothes and putting on tilas, and sometimes maybe eat food that is not offered to Krishna but is qualified? So should we make those compromises?
It's not Krishna. It's not. It's cooked by your mother.
Yeah.
Alright. If wearing Vaishnava clothes at home agitates your parents, it's maybe better not to. It's probably better to go step by step. They're already amazed that you're not drinking tea and coffee. As far as eating food cooked by your mother, it's a tough question. If you can get separate pots, if your mother can adjust to that much, if she adjusts to that much, it means she's got some respect for what you're doing. So that means you can gradually bring her in, and it means that you can gradually make her come more and more into Krishna consciousness. Actually, this is a new frontier for Krishna consciousness. In India, this kind of comment generally didn't come, because even non-devotees used to take Vishnu Prasad. They understood that principle. So, and then by taking Vishnu Prasad, they're already that Prabhupada said everyone in India is Krishna conscious, to some extent. So it's bringing a new culture. And in these pioneering days, those who are the new devotees who are bringing Krishna consciousness into the Western world, they may have to go through so many difficulties. This morning we were discussing with the Surabhi Kunj staff some important questions about young, new devotees dealing with their parents. Now, young people, when they take up something new, they tend to do so with a lot of enthusiasm. And it's good to take up Krishna consciousness with enthusiasm. But this enthusiasm is often misunderstood by parents. And how to deal with parents is often misunderstood by new devotees. Now just consider, there is your mother. All her life she's looked after you. She loves you. That's Maya, anyway. She doesn't know anything beyond that. So all her life she's been caring for you and feeding you nice things to nourish you. She's always thinking how to cook nice food, and all her life she's cooked for you meat, fish and eggs and all these kinds of things. Because she thinks these things are very good for you, and she's cooked them with care and affection for you, and you've been eating them. And one day you come home, your mother says, I have a nice meat pie for you, and the child says, you demon. So we don't recommend that you call your parents demons. We don't recommend you call anyone demons. Of course, there may be demons. There are demons in this world, no doubt. Although Srila Prabhupada said that most people are just misled. The leaders of society are big demons, and other people just misled demons by bad association, but they can be brought around also. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement is meant for killing the demoniac mentality. But generally, I don't know any instance of Prabhupada calling anyone, you are a demon. He may have said that he may have told someone, for instance, he may tell someone that this is a demoniac mentality, not directly on the priest like that. We should also consider, especially when we're dealing with our parents and this, we should consider that ourselves. It was only like 2 days ago that we ourselves were doing these things, maybe 2 days or 2 years. And we should also consider that even though it may be true, that it definitely is true that eating meat and all these things are sinful, but our ability to preach on that level, especially new devotees, is not very developed. So we should be very careful in our presentation of these things. Nowadays it's not unusual to be a vegetarian, so there shouldn't be too much difficulty to explain that. And even many, not only young people, even older people have become vegetarians from a health point of view. And are many people giving up drinking tea? Not much, coffee. But you can also explain that. I mean, people nowadays are more health conscious than in the last any time in history in the Western world. So instead of saying, well, drinking tea is demoniac and drinking beer is demoniac, therefore stuff, you can explain from a secular point of view. And you can say that, a lot of young people nowadays really want to live a very clean kind of life. And I know you think this is a little unusual, but after all, there are so many young people who are getting into drugs and so many bad things, so you can tell your parents, you can see, it's better I get into this than get into that. Another very important thing that is going on here is if older devotees of the same age as the parents visit the parents, and then the parents can see that my children are getting involved in something which people from the same kind of background as myself are also getting involved in. Actually, Mayapur Das was just telling me this afternoon that his parents were very concerned when he became a devotee. But then when his parents spoke about it to their friends, then their friends said that, they're generally very intellectual people and cultured people who join that movement, so it's a good thing. Prabhupada, he used to say that we should present Krishna consciousness as not as a religion, like people think, some kind of faith or fanaticism, but as a scientific and cultural movement for the re-spiritualization of the world. Questions?
Why did the preaching in Croatia 5 years ago consisted out of just leave the faculty and join the temple?
Why did it? That we'll have to ask the devotees who are doing the preaching. In the early days of this movement in America and Western Europe, that was generally the preaching. Because to get this movement started, Prabhupada needed some help. Some people are required to dedicate their lives for this preaching. Although there were some cases also Prabhupada saying that, if you already studied 2 years in a 3-year course, you might as well finish your course and then join. At that time also, dropping out of college was a very common thing, not just to join the Hare Krishna movement. So presumably in Croatia 5 years ago it was a similar thing. The movement had to get started. Someone had to do it. Those who did that, they weren't the losers. They're blessed by Krishna. Next question?
About the subject we talked yesterday. Usually the professors in universities request to express our opinion about the subject we learn. What we say, because those theories are often in opposite to the philosophy of spiritual consciousness. For example, not Freud and Darwin and this and that.
Okay. Well, if they ask you to express an opinion and you express it in cogent terms, then there's no reason for them to reject your expressing your opinion, even if it goes against what they believe. That shows more intelligence. If they're asking you to express an opinion, and you express an opinion which goes against something taught in the class, that shows you have different, more developed intelligence. Here it's presented cogently. The daughter of one of my disciples in England, she was doing a biology examination, biology course, and reading Life Comes from Life. So such a question came up in her final examination. Give your opinion about balance theory. Can it be supported? If so, how? And she gave a complete damnation of it based on Life Comes from Life. She doesn't know exactly how that question was marked, but she got the first grade in her examination. So it must have gone down okay. As Freud, you can also present that. We have enough grounds to argue with anybody who's against Christian consciousness. You can say Freud recommended giving up social inhibitions, and that has been taken up in modern society. But what is the effect? Marriage as an institution is dying. And the result is that the children are brought up nowadays mostly without the care that they used to get in traditional society. You can trace, you can link the tremendous social problems of modern society with, on one hand, the lack of care given to children, and on the other hand, the unbridled lust that is promoted in modern society. That's a very big subject, but the point is that we can preach.
There's one question. Sometimes when I have an exam on Monday, I usually...
Sorry, I didn't understand.
Sometimes when I have an exam on Monday, I usually don't come on Sunday. And when I get an A, the devotees tell me, well, you didn't have to get an A, you couldn't come to a program, you don't have enough faith in Krishna. So the question is, to what extent do we have to try learn hard for our exams, and how much do we have to depend on Krishna's mercy, and is it okay for us due to exams to not to come to some festivals such Sunday feast?
Yeah, this is the question, keeping a balance between secular activities and spiritual activities. Even in the secular activities we're performing, we should understand that even though we're performing them, the ultimate goal is to become fully Krishna conscious. Without Krishna conscious, even if we become the Prime Minister or a big businessman or whatever, it's all useless. On the other hand, as long as we are living within this world, we have some obligations which we should also follow. So if you have some intense activities like studying for exams, it may be that you have to cut down on your spiritual activities. But at the same time you should realize that of ultimate importance is our spiritual activities. The ideal example for Grihastas is Bhakti. He was a responsible government officer, highly respected by the government of the time, British government. He was a responsible father. How many children did he have? 13 children? Many children. He discharged all these responsibilities. At the same time, he did so much work in Krishna consciousness. He wrote so many books. He did so much preaching. And he trained one son to be a great acharya. He trained his children in Krishna consciousness. So that is our ideal. If we are serious, then everything will come up nicely. If we perform our secular duties in the understanding that this life is offered to Krishna, so whatever I do, even if I have to get a job, within that activity, I will do everything dutifully, maintain my Krishna consciousness, and from within secular society, to the best of my capacity, preach Krishna consciousness. So much depends upon the attitude of the devotee himself. Although there are many cases also of devotees who have gone to the Sunday program right before the minor exam and come through with first grade. Some students have told me that after coming to Krishna consciousness they find their ability to study enhanced, and that even without studying so much they can grasp the topics more easily. Certainly the mind won't be filled with so much unnecessary garbage. But that may not be true for everybody. So again, it's an individual thing. You can't legislate in each case.
When during class, professor speaks something against Krishna consciousness, and everybody starts to laugh. Should we react, or is
he's directly criticizing you?
Yes.
Do you have grounds to? I mean, if you did that in, for instance, if you did that in England or America, if the professor attacked your religion, you could sue him. Can you do that here?
Maybe in the law.
Maybe not sue him, but you could make a protest to the headmaster. Yeah, so you should do it. You shouldn't have it the only way. That's, do you have a constitution in this country? It must be against the constitution. It's freedom of religion. You shouldn't tolerate that. Show them that we're not cowards. We're not going to unnecessarily agitate you, but you shouldn't unnecessarily agitate us either. What would happen if a professor made an insult against the Pope in his class? Can you imagine what would happen? In Bosnia, if he spoke something against Islam, what would happen? Shot, right? Isn't it? Someone would probably shoot him. So, these things are very deeply felt. We shouldn't tolerate this. And then someone else asks a question. First. Yeah?
The question is, how much level are we supposed to put in study? She's studying medicine and she's asking, her ambitions are really to get a better grade, and she's now interested where do we put the line between where our own satisfaction is to get a higher grade, or where the sense to the feeling if we study more and then later on we can use this knowledge to serve devotees better.
Yeah, the point is that you're already deep into the course, right? Mm-hmm. You're already taking it up. So you might as well do it properly. Don't let it be said that by taking the Krishna consciousness then it makes you into a fool. At the same time, you have to be careful not to lose touch with Krishna consciousness. That devotee I was telling you about, he was studying medicine, and he was also, was under a lot of pressure because he was rigid with his Krishna consciousness, but he studied also. He got good grades, and he's a junior lecturer at a medical college. With that status, he's preaching among the doctors. What he told me is that among the doctors, they won't listen to anyone unless they're at least a doctor themselves. They consider non-doctors subhuman. It's not intelligent. Less intelligent. So he has a bit of a reputation now. Because these different people from around the world, it's a very prestigious college in India. And different people come from around the world and make different presentations. And he just challenges them. And then he said, when he first did that, he told me that people, when they're going out, they'll look at his badge and they say, Dr. Venugopal, junior lecturer. So he has his credentials, and people can't argue with him. So if we keep our vision clear, that our life is meant for service to Krishna, and go on with our studies and so. Then, good? What is it? Other questions? Well, one thing I'd like to say, because, let me just say this, because I heard this twice when I was just down traveling in Croatia. This is a pretty bogus idea. Devotees who are already living in the temple should go and get university degrees. If you already came to dedicate your life in the temple, then why are you going to go out and spend 3 years getting a degree? Already you came to dedicate your life, and now you're going to go out and learn something. Don't have anything to do with Krishna consciousness. Anyway, I already gave a lecture on this, whole lecture in split. If anyone wants to know more about that, then get the cassette links.
I work still with my parents. It is very easy to come on the influence of Maya, for instance. I don't change properly. I get up late, I watch TV, and
Get up late and what's the after that?
watch TV.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. Watching TV is very destructive of Christian consciousness. Now there's a big hole in the middle there, you should not fall. Yeah. You know, if you watch TV, you're definitely going to get up late, because what happens, you sit in front of it, and you become hypnotized. So you sit until very late, watching all that nonsense. And simultaneously it takes away all your enthusiasm for spiritual life, so you don't want to get up early anyway. Traditionally in Christian consciousness we have 4 regulated principles: no eating, no illicit sex, no drinking, no intoxication. We should add one more: no TV. It's very contaminated, Just the other day in Ljubljana, I turned on the TV because I wanted to watch this cassette program. At 10 o'clock in the morning, there's some American movie, some naked thing. TV and comic books and all these things, all just promoted. What they're promoting is all very contaminated. So you may think, well, I'll just watch the news. But even that, you can just see the headlines. This happened, that happened. Most of the time it's not worth understanding it in detail. Small thing. Some politician said this, and some flood or some earthquake. Of course, if there's war going on in the next country, then you may want to follow the news just to know what's going on for safety's sake. When India was at war with Pakistan, probably just to see the newspaper. But generally, there's no need to get deeply into these things. You see whatever you have to see, and just leave it. Then you have to make your own decision. You may say, what should I do about this? You have to make your own decision to do what is required to be Christian conscious. I'm not going to come and live in your home and tell you, don't watch the TV. Now we got the instructions of Guru and Krishna received in Parampara. If we take this seriously, we get free from the terrible cycle of birth and death and go to Krishna to be happy forever. And if we don't, we get whipped by Maya life after life. It's really up to every individual to take it seriously themselves. We have these festivals, we have Sunday programs, we have so many facilities just to give you enthusiasm and strength and direction. If you have time to watch TV, it means you have time to read Prabhupada's books. So you should make a program that you should make a schedule for yourself. That see how much time you have for reading every day. And then you set yourself a goal that I must complete reading Bhagavatam by such and such. You can do it canto by canto. Okay, let's start. Bhagavad Gita as it is, Nectar Devotion, Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, I have to finish this book in such and such a date. And make it more than you think you can do, rather than less. And then you go to the temple and make a vow to God in the temple that I'm going to do this. Unless I get typhoid or something. I'm going to finish reading this book by such and such a date. And if you do that, you won't have time to watch TV. And you won't have a taste for it either. If you have a taste for Srimad Bhagavatam, then where's the taste for TV? Such a difference. This TV, it's just so nonsensical. And Srimad Bhagavatam is so sublime. The cure for TV is read Srimad Bhagavatam. Become absorbed in that. What was the first thing Shukadeva Swami said to Parikshit Maharaj? You have to study Bhagavatam, you know? You're asking very nice questions. What were those questions? Can anyone say what the questions of Brigid Maharaj? What's the most important question he asked? Which forms the whole basis of Shukadeva speaking to him.
What a person should do on what a person should meditate on the time of death.
Yeah, what is the duty of a human being, especially of those who are about to die? So when I get absorbed in this, so much nectar. You read again and again and again. There comes a time in the day when if you don't eat, you feel hungry, right? So we should make a habit of reading Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. So that if you don't read, you feel uneasy. Nothing to read Bhagavatam, have to read. The day is incomplete unless you read Sari Prabhupada's books. Any other questions?
Young devotees are often very enthusiastic. Is there a chance for them to become fanatic, and how to avoid it?
I discussed that in this essay, in this book, My Memories of Prabhupada. In that essay called On Speaking Strongly in Prabhupada's Service. It's an essay called On Speaking Strongly in Srila Prabhupada's Service. Because I got fed up of devotees telling me I shouldn't speak strongly. So I made an essay with 136 quotes from Prabhupada's books, Bhakti Thakur's writing, about how we must speak strongly. Otherwise we'll just become wishy-washy. Yeah, Krishna consciousness is alright, but if you don't want to, it's okay, it's all the same. No, it's not true. Actually, I remember one lecture in Vrindavan, Vidayananda Maharaj made some very strong statement. Vidayananda Maharaj. And then he, just after he said, we have to maintain our radical edge in Krishna consciousness. So, after the class, in the questions, I asked him to elaborate more on that point. So he explained the Latin root, he's a great linguist, the Latin root of this radical. And that means it actually means to be connected with the substance of the truth. Now, fanaticism means if you, that is defined, I always said that fanaticism means a lack of knowledge. Religion without philosophy is sentiment or sometimes fanaticism. Do you remember reading that? So if without knowledge you simply go around saying you're a demon, this kind of thing, then that is called fanaticism. But if someone who has gone deeply into this philosophy and dedicated their life to it, they should preach these things just to make the point clear that there is a difference between Krishna consciousness and not Krishna consciousness. It's not all the same. So, if a young devotee who doesn't know the philosophy is speaking very strong about that, we should maybe caution him that first you study the philosophy very deeply. It's nice if you preach like that, but first you study the philosophy very deeply and practice it for some time. Let's see how you practice it for some time. Of course, many people are attracted to this movement because it is very strong. They want to get a clear-cut direction. Because in the modern age, this idea of eclecticism is very prominent. Eclecticism means you take a little idea from here, and you take another idea from there, and you mix it up with this, and you make some kitchery idea. All ideas are all the same, and you take this one or that one. So many people are attracted because we give a clear direction that this is Krishna consciousness, this is the path to follow. We're not confused. I was just speaking in England with Amita Prabhu, who oversees the distribution of our books there. He's the DBL judge. DBL means more or less. So we were discussing this point about strong books. Just in Vienna, someone was asking about distributing light comes from light. somebody always said this is too heavy. Prabhupada said to distribute that book, so how can you judge it's too heavy? Prabhupada said to distribute. Now, if you think that we shouldn't distribute heavy books, then you should edit Prabhupada's books. Take out all the sections where words like rascal, nonsense, and fool are there. It's a very good idea. We could sell many sets of books because the set will become this thick. Nothing in the book. The fact is that Prabhupada has presented Krishna consciousness very strongly. Now, Mita told me about when this Laws of Nature book, that one devotee who was overseeing the congregational preaching in England very strongly objected to the distribution of this book because he thought we have to make a good impression, we don't want to upset people. And especially he was very concerned because there was a picture of the Yamadutas pulling the soul of the dying sinner out of the body. And he thought this would make a very bad impression on the public. And Mita Prabhu told me that anyway, they distributed this book. And it just so happened that they got more letters of response from this book than any other book except Science of Self-Realization. None of these letters were unfavorable, although I would have said that even if they were unfavorable letters, we shouldn't bother about them anyway, but as it happened, none of them were unfavorable. People were very impressed and wanted to know more. And Amita said that many people wrote and said that this picture of the Yamadutas made me really think about what I'm doing with my life. Some people may not like it, but it's a fact. The people who live sinful lives, they are visited by the Yamadutas. It's a very heavy thing. We should inform people of this. It's our duty as devotees. Of course, that immature neo-devotees, if they try to present these things without proper knowledge, then it will appear to be fanaticism. But even then, if they take it to Krishna consciousness strongly, that's not a bad thing. If we train them from the beginning, just smile at everybody and say, yes, you're eating, that's very nice, and you're drinking wine, that's very nice, and then if they start off like that, then now they are going to become strong and fixed in their principles. So the real thing is to educate the devotees and train them in the philosophy. I would personally prefer to see devotees, if there's any error, to be strong in their preaching and their principles, rather than go the other way and just be all washed out and compromising. We have to be sensitive, but become compromised. Anyway, this is discussed at great length in Vikasa. I'm personally concerned that within our movement there are certain streams of preaching which are somewhat compromising. Just like we have interfaith preaching, which is very nice, but if we see what was Prabhupada's standard approach when he met Christians, what was the approach which he always took? He would always say that if you love Jesus, you only follow his instructions, are you not killing, are you eating meat? And when Cardinal Danelio in France said to Prabhupada, well, let's go to higher things, and Prabhupada said, there's no question of going to higher things unless you accept this point. There's no discussion of love of God if you don't follow his instructions. So, we should be very careful to stick what Prabhupada gave us.
Regarding this book, like, we said the Prabhupada say that we should be book.
Yeah. Not only that, you want to translate that question? Munishwara Prabhu is asking for confirmation that I said that Prabhupada said we should distribute these books. And the answer is yes. And that section at the end, Hansaduta smashing Dr. Kabur, Prabhupada specifically said that should be put in the book. At the end of the book, there is an exchange of correspondence between Hansaduta and Dr. Kabur in Sri Lanka, in which Hansaduta absolutely smashes him. Prabhupada specifically said that should be, the audience didn't ask Prabhupada, but Prabhupada himself said that this should be put in the book. This book, actually, before it came out in English, came out in German. Leben kommt von Leben. And the book that you have now, Life Comes to Light, is actually edited. The original Conversations was much more heavy. The German edition was not edited in the same way. It's kept the original things that Prabhupada said. Prabhupada wasn't afraid to preach strongly. He stressed book distribution.
Stories that are outside where the university, they would rent a house.
Very good idea. You should do that.
When we began to develop these policies, after some time we tend to correct them. Can you tell us something about the Sanarita? Is it that we want them good, or is it just that we try to adjust them to us?
You will say that so everyone can hear information. To correct others is not necessarily an artha. If it's done in the proper spirit, it is a great quality to help others to become Krishna conscious. Bhakti Thakur sometimes said that my father trained me in proofreading. Proofreading, it means reading a manuscript and correcting it. You don't have a word for that? You must have a word for it. It's not exactly editing, it's part of it. Proofreading means you see spelling mistakes. It's not editing. You find mistakes in the spelling and punctuation. So he said that I don't only proofread books. He said I proofread people. I proofread religions. I proofread the whole world. I find out a mistake and I correct it. And he said I was born in the astrological sign of the crown. Astrological, Lagna. Astrological sign of the crown. So he said, just like that, if I find everything wrong, I pinch. But we also have to see what is our position to correct others. It's not the position of a junior to correct a senior. He may do also some things. Exactly the etiquette for this. I'm making a big book on Vaishnava etiquette. It will be like a big Bhagavatam volume. There's so many different things. So hopefully next time when I come, when you ask this question, I'll distribute one book to you. Now another kind of thing is fault-finding mentality. That is a different attitude. That if you're just looking for faults just to boost up your own false ego, that's something different. Even in correcting juniors, we have to see their capacity to accept correction. The new devotees coming into the temple, it can be quite bewildering because they do everything wrong. And they have to be told, just that don't pick up charan with a bowl and drink all drink like that. Don't offer your obeisances with your feet towards the deities. There are so many important things that they have to learn. It's better that there's a Bhakti leader who particularly looks after them. Otherwise it may be frustrating for them. Alright, so this conversation probably could go on all night. I am a great believer in Pandit Mangalati. Because Srila Prabhupada stressed it so much. So I read that in the Vaishnava etiquette book also. All these things. Especially those who are congregational members that come now. So this is the opportunity to come and open devotees to Mangalati. But it does become difficult to go to Mangalati to chant your rounds clearly. You take place very late. These are common sense principles. So let's all go and take rest. Get up early for another blissful day of worship. I would also suggest to the end of the session